good afternoon everyone. Welcome to APNIC eLearning web class. Today is Wednesday, 13th of May in 2015, and the topic that we're going to discuss for this session is about reverse DNS delegation. Now, before we proceed, some housekeeping things. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Cheryl Hermoso. I work as a training officer for APNIC. APNIC, as you know, is the Asia Pacific Network Information Center, and we distribute the IP addresses, basically number of resources, to members in the Asia Pacific region. So this session is very helpful if you have an IP address block that you have requested perhaps as part of your APNIC membership or have gotten from your upstream providers. So these blocks are going to be delegated to you. So you must create your reverse DNS, reverse delegation, for these specific blocks. Now, a few more things about this session. This class will run for 1 hour, and at the end of the class, I will be asking you to fill in a survey to help us basically get some feedback out of you with regards to how this class went through. And if you have any suggestions on how we can improve this and then the topics, then please feel free to write them down as well. Now, what are we going to cover for this session? Pretty much, we'll cover the entire reverse DNS. What is reverse DNS? Why is it useful? Why do we need it? What are the principles behind that? And how is it compared to forward DNS? Where is it in the DNS hierarchy tree? And then some steps that we can do if you are the person in charge of creating reverse DNS for your network. If you're the zone administrator, then we will look at the steps to creating reverse zones, pointer records, and doing some reverse delegations. And the last part is looking at the who is the main object, who is, as the database that contains all the resources. And one of those resources is the block, the IP address block, which in this case is the reverse DNS. So we call it as the main object. So we'll look at that in more detail as we go on. So let's start with identifying or understanding what is reverse DNS. Now, coming to the class, I'm sure that we have some understanding of forward DNS. Or generally, when we talk about DNS, we always think about forward DNS. What is forward DNS? It maps IP addresses, okay, into names. So basically, what you input as in your, say, in your browsers or when you do your queries is the name, the domain name, and you're looking for the corresponding IP address or the number. So this is an example entry that would go into your zone file for forward DNS. So you have on the left side, you have the domain name svc00.apnic.net. On the right side is a corresponding IP address for this domain name. Now, where is reverse DNS? Reverse DNS is the other way around, right? It maps numbers to names. So what you're looking for here is a corresponding name given an IP address. We don't normally do this, say, when you're browsing something. We normally just input the domains, right? But there are reasons why reverse DNS is also important, and we will look into that. Now, when we say reverse DNS here, if you have, say, for example, in your forward DNS zone, your zone file, you have this entry for svc00.apnic.net. You have that mapping. That's an A record, right? Now, in reverse DNS, it is not automatically true that the reverse is true. So when you search for 202.12.28.31, unless you have a reverse entry, it does not point automatically to the same name. Okay, so meaning that, like for forward zone, if you have apnic.net going to a number, the reverse is not always true for that particular entry. So where do we use reverse DNS? I get this question a lot because people were more concerned about adding forward zones, right? You can see right away what is the use of forward zones. But what about with reverse zones? Now, sometimes we do forget doing this. That's because it doesn't have very huge impact with our DNS habits, but there are uses of reverse DNS as well. One is for service denial, and related to that is spam identification. We with service denial, it essentially means that when your domain is not fully reverse delegated, then you will not be allowed access into that service. A common example to this is anonymous FTP. When we say, when we try to connect to an FTP and our IP address is not mapped to a domain, then it usually will just time out. It will not get us into a page that we needed to go through, or the file or the folder that we needed to go through. Another is with diagnostics. Many of us here perhaps are network administrators. We do troubleshooting once in a while, maybe even more often than that. Now, when we do troubleshooting, you want things to be easy. Normally, let's say for example, you use some utilities or tools. A great example here is traceroute. You do traceroute, you're trying to look for a problem somewhere between your network and an endpoint. Perhaps you wanted to see whether there is a problem somewhere in between them. So you do a traceroute. You look for the hops, and it hops from one network to the other until it reaches the destination. Now, with traceroute, generally it uses IP address, right? It hops from the IP address of your gateway or router to the next one until it reaches the destination. But wouldn't it be easier if you can see or you have an indication whether this IP address belongs to yourself, to your network, or whether this IP belongs to your neighbors, or maybe somewhere farther in the internet? So most traceroutes now actually have support for reverse DNS, meaning when you do a trace, it will give you the reverse zone, basically the domain corresponding to the IP address that is within the link. So in this way, it helps us easily find out where the issue is, whether there's a problem in your network or somewhere else, right? These are just a few things that DNS is useful for. The last one here is a spam identification, and as I've said, it has a lot to do with service denial. Now with spam identification, most spam filters have a way of not accepting email messages coming from domains that are not fully reverse delegated. What do we mean by that? In your forward zones, if you have, say, an email for the domain apnic.net, so you have, say, training at apnic.net, that's your email address, right? Now you send that through, and on the recipient side, the spam filter receives this message. So we'll do some checking, check if there's an attachment, check if there are like words, check if there are patterns that makes it spam. One other thing that it checks for is it fully reverse delegated? So it will do a reverse check. This is the IP address that I received this from, meaning this is the mail server for that domain. Now this is the domain of the email address, right? So I'll do a reverse check for this domain. What is the mail server or the MX record for this particular domain? So also with the IP address where it receives that, when you say reverse delegation, it checks for the domain given that IP address. So basically, it does that kind of checking. So you know that if the email that you receive really came from the mail server, okay, whose IP address was used to actually send that email, you can find that in the headers, then you can rest assured that it is possible it's not spam. Okay, the source is verifiable. Whereas if it's not, then it adds up to the spam score. And when spam filter reaches a particular score, then that email will either be put into, say, a vault or discarded. So it depends on the settings that you have in your spam filters. This might not actually reach the intended destination. If it results in failed lookup, then it affects these emails spam score. So that is usually where it is very useful. So make sure that if you are operating a mail server, okay, then you make sure that you have your proper reverse entire DNS hierarchy tree. Now, if you see, if you're familiar with forward DNS, it looks like this. It starts out with the root at the very top, and then followed by here you have your top level domains, GTLDs, CCTLDs, and all that. You have .net, .org, .com, and after that you also have subdomains that follows through that, right? So if you are going to say go to training.apnic.net, if you look at this reverse DNS tree, you actually traverse this tree from the bottom going up to come up with your fully qualified domain name or FQDN. So that's like this, training.apnic.net done, right? So what about in reverse DNS tree? As I've said earlier, the pattern is the same. It is also part of this entire DNS tree. So what you see here is we have a .arpa top level domain. This is where you put all the number resources. So under that we have n-adra, so that's n-adra.arpa, and then after that you add your IP address block. So basically this is still very classical with DNS. What do we mean by that? So we work with octets. Let's say, for example, that we have 202.64.22.0/24. So let's say that's the block that you got from, say, either APNIC or from your upstream. So you have a /24 block. Now, when I say classical here, we first look at the very first octet, in this case 202, right? So under in-adra, you actually have from 0 to 255 all the values, all the possible values in your first octet. Next one, you have here, you have 64 because we have 202.64, but it also have from 0 to 255 all possible values for each of the class A, this one, the first octet blocks, and then followed by the next block, which is your third octet. Here in this case we have 22. So for our 202.64.22/24, our fully qualified domain name will be, again from the bottom going up, it will be 22.64.202.nadra.arpa. Again, same way that you traverse your forward zone, that is how you create your domain, okay? Your fully qualified domain name for your IP address block. Now this block, this domain is very important. When you configure your DNS servers, you will use this domain. You are not going to use just the IP address. You will use this domain. You'll create a zone entry. So you'll have forward and reverse zones. In your forward zone, let's say for example, you have zone myapnic.net or zone yourdomain.com. In your reverse, it will be on the same configuration file. You will have zone, and then the domain will be this block for 202.64.22/24. Does that make sense? I hope that is clear with everybody. People keep on asking, why do we have this? Why does it have to be like this and not the IP address? It's a bit confusing for some, but that is how you add a reverse DNS. All right. Don't forget to add n-adra.arpa. That is this two nodes leading up to the root. Next one is here, what about IPv6? Now previously, and you might still see this in older configurations, we have a .int top level domain. .int was used pretty much for testing IPv6 blocks with reverse DNS tree. Now we don't use this anymore. This is already deprecated. We have IPv6 under .arpa. So under that ARPA, you only not have n-adra, you have another node, which is IP6. So all your IPv6 addresses falls under the IP6 subdomain. So when you create your domain here, it will be your IPv6 addresses .ip6.arpa. Okay, so main difference between v4 and v6, as you can see here, is we use n-adra for IPv4, we use IP6 is like what are the steps involved then when you are creating your reverse zones. Now, assuming that you're already familiar with creating forward zones, now the steps that are involved here are pretty much the same as with forward zones. What are those steps? You create your, first of all, your configuration file, and I'm using bind here as an example. Okay, the steps for NSD and a few others might be a bit different, but the idea is the same. First of all, you have to identify your zones, okay? The zones that you are the administrator of, the zones in which you are the authoritative server to answer queries for these zones. So you identify these zones. After you have done that, you create the resource records under each of those zones. So for example, you have myzone.net, right? So that is your zone. You configure that in your named.conf if it's fine. And then in your zone file, you will have resource records. At the very top of your zone file, you'll have your SOA record followed by your NS records. And then shortly after that, what follows are all pointer records. This is a big difference between forward zone. In forward zones, you have A record, quad A record, C names. You can have other things as well, that text. But those are the common ones. MX records should be there as well. Now with reverse zones, you only have pointer records. And a good practice that you can do here is whenever you create a forward zone, okay, you also create the corresponding reverse zone for that. Okay, make sure that when you have an entry in that reverse zone for, say, a resource record, say an A or a quad A record, that an equivalent pointer record is also created for that. And that way you don't forget about it. Okay, again, many people, many zone administrators tend to neglect reverse DNS for this reason. They are not aware of the common usefulness of reverse DNS. So we've already discussed that, right? So good practice to be able to always add that is to make sure that maybe you can do a script with this when an entry is created for forward zones, then you create a pointer record in your reverse zones, okay? Many ways to do this, many DNS software, and again, it may be different for each one. The ones that I have here as an example are all using mine. Now, when you create your zone file, another good way or a good practice is to make sure that the file name corresponds with the block that it is used for. So you have db.203.176.189. So it's very descriptive. You know that this is for the block 203.176.189/24. This is very useful, especially if you are managing many zones. And this has a tendency to grow big very easily. Why is that? I will look more into that detail, but essentially, okay, when you create your reverse zones, we said that it is classful, right? So when you say classful here, you create either /16 or /24s. Now, what if you have a big block that does not exactly sit between your octets? Then in that case, you will have to create smaller zones that are within the octet boundaries. So let's say, for example, you have a /22. A /22 IPv4 block is, you cannot create just a single zone for that. You must create /24 blocks because again, it's classful. You should sit within the octet boundaries. So you must create four zone for the /24s because there are four /24s in a /22 block. Does that make sense? I will go more to that as we go on. Now, how does it look like in your zone file? So this is your SOA record. Now, this is the same whether you're using it for forward or reverse DNS. For reverse DNS, the structure is still the same. It's your domain name, SOA, and then some timing parameters that follows that. We also have a serial number that indicates whether what is the current serial? And this is useful when you're comparing the entries in your primaries and your secondary zones DNS servers. Now the timing parameters here you have refresh, retry, expire, and TTL. So refresh is essentially the the timing parameter that is used to as a timing interval when your primary server will be checked again by the secondary if there have been changes or not. Again, this is generally the same for all DNS. It's not just for reverse DNS, but make sure that you understand these timing parameters. Retry is if the server is unable to contact the primary server, then it will retry that again after some time, and that's your retry period. And if it doesn't reply within a certain time, which is your expire time, then it will no longer serve or answer queries for that particular zone. Okay, again, that is still the same when you create your zone file for your reverse DNS, you must have the same thing. Again, this is just the TTL values. Your TTL values depend on how often you change your records. For the case of reverse DNS, okay, you are very much dependent on, say, the dynamics of your network. Let's say, for example, you add entries every day. You have DNS for all the nodes that are connecting, and maybe you have a DHCP server that gives them different addresses every time. So it has that impact. So if your DNS changes frequently, then you set it to a lower value. If you're sure that it doesn't change for a long time, then you set it to a higher value. But the recommended values, you can find them on RFC 1912. Refresh time is normally 24 hours, 2 hours for retry, 30 days or 1 month for expired time, and minimum TTL is about 4 days. This is how your PTR records would look like. So your pointer record, again, make sure that you know this part. This is your label. That's 131.28.12.202.in-adder.arpa. So this is for the IP address 202.12.28.131, right? Again, you put them more like in a reverse way because we're traversing from the bottom up in a similar way as for domains. So this is your fully qualified domain name. And we use PTR records or pointer records to point that to the domain that will use that IP address. Now another way to do this is to use, in this case, just 131. Why is that? In this case, we either have a statement internally that gives us this value, or this has already been added as our zone. So let's say for this case, our zone is 28.12.202.in-adder.arpa. So inside a zone file, we only add 1, 2, 3, all the way to 255, and then in, PTR, and the domain name. It is very normal or very common to have the complete entries for reverse zone, unlike with forward zone, because you're not sure yet what will be your forward DNS values, right? Forward zone values. Whereas with reverse, you have an idea of the entire range of your IP addresses. So you can add all of them and then have a default value. And then you just change that later on when you have actually assigned that domain, that IP address to a particular domain. But by default, you maybe just have domain1.myserver.net, domain2, domain3, domain255.myserver.net. That's how you usually do it. Now, what about in IPv6? We said that in IPv4, reverse DNS is still very classful. We are reliant on the octets. How do we do this in IPv6? I only showed you in the graph, in the diagram, that all IPv6 addresses falls under IP6.arpa. So you can see that there, right? You have ip6.arpa dot. But what about the rest of the IPv6 address? Let's just say, for example, we have this one, 3FFE8050, so it's a very long IPv6 address. So when we write down um, this as a fully qualified domain name, you can either look at this or look at the bottom here. You should include all the hexadecimal digits. So we're working here on the nibble boundaries. Instead of octets, we're using nibble boundaries. So if it's already converted in hex, of course, you'll use each of the digits in your IPv6 address. In this case, for example, that will be all the 128 bits, or in hex, that will be all the 32 hex digits for your IPv6 address. Notice here in this example, we have colon, colon 1. In IPv6, a colon is used for trimming down an IPv6 address, meaning you have a few fields here or values that are all zeros. Now, when you look at this, you'll know that there are lots of zeros somewhere in between. How many? If you can investigate yourself. There should be a total of 32 hex digits. There should be a total of 8 fields in your IPv6 address. So given that, make sure that you expand this. And once you have expanded, that's the only time that you create your record. Because if you do it from just here, you will miss out a few values, a few zeros that are in your double column. So in this example, you have one dot, see here, all these zeros are all the zeros in your double column here, followed by 2, 4, 0, all the way going to the left here until you reach EFF3, and follow that up with IP6.arpa. Now, to make this a bit simpler, you can still use a directive. In this case, let's use the $origin directive. What is this for? So in this case, we have a pointer record here. Now, we have the $origin specified previously before this. Now, if you don't add a dot, a trailing dot at the end of your label here, then that means that it will be appended by either the zone entry that they have configured, or the value in your $origin. So in this case, to complete this line, that will be 1 dot all zeros, dot 2 dot 4 dot 0 dot 0 dot 0 dot 6 dot 8 all the way to IP6.arpa dot. So actually, if you already add the entire FQDN of your entry, then make sure that you have a trailing dot at the end. Otherwise, it will be appended with your the value from your either $origin or the value of your zone. Okay, that's a typical way to make this a little bit easier. Dealing with IPv6 can be a bit confusing, okay, to begin with. And if you're going to add all entries, like lots of entries for your entire IPv6 block, then it's possible that you will commit some mistakes. And this is one way to make this a bit simpler. You put some of the values in $origin and then add the rest. Normally this is, say, /64. You subdivide your blocks into /64s. You create separate zones for each /64 block, and inside your /64, basically here you will only add the last 64 bits, okay, which is half, which is about 16 hex digits, instead of adding the entire FQDN. Okay, that's one way that you can manage IPv6 reverse zones or reverse DNS. This is a complete example. We're using here IPv4. You notice at the top we have a $origin that points to 192.168.1. So we can say that this is possibly for 192.168.1/24 block. Alright? So notice at the very top as well, you have your SOA record, you have your timing parameters there, followed by your name server records. Whether it's v4 or v6, it's always a good idea to have at least two name servers that will become authoritative for this particular zone. So in this case, we have ns.company and ns2.company. Those are the name servers, authoritative name servers for the zone 1.168.192.nagra.arpa. Then it is followed by all of these here. You have your pointer records. Notice here that same with forward zones, you can add many entries for the same label. In this case, you have this for 192.168.1.1. Okay, it points to two names. So let's say, for example, one server is hosting many services. It's hosting your authentication server. It's hosting your FTP, your file server, your um, media server and all that, then you can add all of that. You can have a pointer record for all of that. Now, another very useful thing that you might want to look at, and you will use this when you do a lot of reverse delegation. Okay, this is your $generate directive, and what it does essentially is you can just specify a range of IP. In this case, this is from 65 to 127, and then you point that to host, and then $is your variable here. So that will host 65, that company.org, host 66, host 67, up to host 127. So you're generating all the entries. And this is usually for generic ones. As I've said earlier, it's a good practice to, for the range of IP address, you already create the reverse entries for that. And you change that whenever, okay, that IP address has already been used by a particular domain. But if not, you keep on using the generic one. So this is how you do those generic values. So host 1, host 2, host 3, just to complete the entries for your reverse zone. Okay? Now, how do you manage reverse DNS? Now, there are many ways depending on where you got your blocks. Okay? Essentially, for forward DNS, it is dependent on your domain provider, yeah? Your domain hosting and all that. With reverse DNS, it follows the trail of IP address distribution. So where do your IP address come from? If you are an APNIC member, okay, and you got like bigger blocks, maybe you got /23/22 and all that, then once it has been delegated to you, okay, so once you have requested your block, then these reverse blocks will then be delegated to you. Okay, IPNIC does and manages the reverse delegation for both IPv4 and IPv6. So when you do your registration, okay, it will follow that a domain object will be created for that IP address block before it is distributed, before it is provided to you. However, please make sure that you are familiar that forward and reverse zones are kind of different in that sense. APNIC does not host your DNS name servers, okay? We do not configure your reverse zone files. In a way that's similar to forward zones, because like once your zone has been delegated to you, you create your files and everything, your zone files, and you manage it yourself. Okay. For forward zones, there is an option for you to host that with your hosting domain perhaps. But with reverse zones, once this block has been delegated to you, you must have, okay, corresponding name servers that are authoritative, okay, and the entry will be created pointing to that name server, okay. Now, APNIC only delegates the authority of your reverse zones to the DNS name servers that you provide through your domain object. So let's say, for example, that you have a /22 block, okay, /22 block. Now, previously, the administrator before you have already created a domain object for the first /24. Now, you want to now use the second /24 block. But, of course, to be able to create reverse zones and all that, you must have the delegation pointing to you. So you must create a domain object. Sorry, not a reverse zone. It's a domain object. This is done through MyAPNIC. So you log into MyAPNIC, you request for your domain object, and then you must provide two name servers. You provide their fully qualified domain name, or FQDN. Okay, I might have the screenshot somewhere here, but those are the steps required coming from you. And then you submit that, that will be approved, and then you will see the next time that we reload the DNS servers that this block will now be pointing to your name servers. Now, what are the requirements for reverse delegation? Now, it depends on the size of your block. As I said with IPv4, it is still classful, right? So we're dependent on kind of /24/16 delegations. Now, /16 delegations are already very rare. Okay, you don't get that much block these days. So most likely we do /24 delegations. So again, if you either get a /24 or a bigger block, then the delegation will be done per /24. You must provide at least one name server, okay, that's the minimum, but it's always a good idea to have two name servers. If more, then that's also fine. Now, this address blocks are the blocks that are delegated to you. If you have bigger than this, then it will still be delegated, subdivided into smaller /24 delegations. Now, what about on your end? What if you have smaller than /24? Now, technically, this happens when your upstream provider gives you a smaller block, let's say a /27 or a /28 block. Or in your case, if you are the APNIC member, you want to provide or give, say, smaller /27 blocks to your customers or to one of your sites, then that falls under less than /24 delegations. You cannot come to APNIC and do that reverse delegation, okay? It's not done using MyAPNIC. It's not done by adding an entry in the whois object, a domain entry whois object. Instead, it will be done locally on your end. That side, that smaller blocks are no longer supported in the RIR level. So that actually is covered under classless and Android ARPA delegation. So if you are going to do this, I did not include slides here that covers that, but if you find it difficult to implement it and you have that requirement, please send us an email and we'll be happy to guide you on how this is done. Okay, but essentially this is adding the records in your name servers and then pointing all the rest of your blocks, of these blocks that have been delegated to that name server. Okay, that's pretty much the same with IPv6 as well. With your delegations, once you receive your /32 or /48 blocks, then these will be delegated to you as well. Okay, so how do you go about the reverse delegation procedures? They are mostly done using the MyAPNIC portal, where you can add your whois domain object. You must make sure that your name servers are up, they're available, you have configured it to use that block, you have configured the zones for that before actually submitting the request to the database. At the same time, you must also provide your maintainer object. In the whois database, all objects are protected by the maintainer. So if you want to make changes or if you want to add new entries, you must provide the password for your maintainer. Okay, these are the responsibilities for each. So you know, APNIC, as I've said, manages the reverse delegation. Once your requests have been approved, once you have been allocated an IP address block, then it will be automatically reverse delegated to you. Okay. On your side, you must, of course, be familiar with the procedures involved. We've already gone through that. You must maintain the name servers for the block that is allocated to you, okay, and keep accurate records in your database. Also, keep the reverse DNS current in the whois database. Because what normally happens is, like, you have created a domain object in the whois database, and it's pointing to, let's say, ns1 and ns2.mydomain.com. Now, after a while, you have changed your name server. Maybe it's now pointing to NS3 or NS4, that myserver.com, right? So it's a different one. So make sure that it is also updated in the WHOIS database. Why? Because the reverse delegation is still pointing to your name server. What is delegation, by the way? In reverse DNS, it's the same as in forward DNS, right? If you have a node, a parent node, and you want to delegate it a smaller, a sub node, okay, a child node, then if it's reverse delegated, then there should be an entry in the parent node that points to the child. Okay. Now in reverse DNS, that is done in MyAPNIC, in the MyAPNIC DNS servers, the DNS entries will have records pointing to your DNS server, the two DNS servers that we have mentioned that you have to provide. So make sure that you keep your reverse DNS current with the entries that are in the WHOIS database. This is a screenshot of how you do reverse DNS delegation from MyAPNIC. Now here, notice what are the address ranges. This will be your IP address block. Then the name service, you must provide your fully qualified domain name followed by your maintainer. You can also do this in bulk by going to IPv4, IPv6 under resources and then bulk reverse delegation. Okay. This is the domain object that I was talking to you about. So this is an entry in the WHOIS database. So notice here, you have the fully qualified domain name for the reverse entry for your blog. So in this case, that's for 202.12.28/24 that has been assigned to these administrators, and the name servers are these three. Okay, so make sure that these values are always correct. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this session. If you have any questions, this is the time to ask them. Please write them down in the chat. In the meantime, I will also share the link to the survey. You can see that over in the slides, but I'm not sure whether you can click on that link. So if you can't, I am also going to write down the link to the survey on the chat box. I don't see anyone typing questions here, so I assume we are all okay and you don't have questions at the moment. If you do think of anything later on, perhaps if you're going to configure reverse, you're going to do reverse delegations for your blocks and you run into some problems, please let us know and we will be happy to help. If you want a copy of the slides, it's available in the FTP. The link to the FTP, generally you will be redirected to that, but if not, this is the link to our FTP page. You can download a PDF copy of the materials from there. All right, are there any questions? All right, that's the last time. I just needed to check that it's clear with everyone. Now, this is our APNIC help desk page that you can check out if you have any questions with regards to the resources and if you're doing reverse delegation as well. Now, with that done, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you another time. Bye-bye.